On the podcast this week, we analyse a key strategy from Ryanair and find out whether you'd be flying high in your business with it. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancott, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. So I can't believe you came in here and described it as, I'm here from the green room.
Our bedroom is green, isn't it? I was in there, blow dry my hair, put some makeup on.
Well, you then quoted the rider, where's my water? Where's my twiglets?
Yeah, I did say it's like the star has arrived and there's no...
I know. I mean, the ego has landed. I'm here from the green room. I mean, goodness me.
Yeah, I had to get my own glass of tap water and my own twiglets as well, didn't I? You really don't look after
Prepare for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, a few things this week. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the skip index because I thought this was interesting. There's a guy I read, he writes a column in a newspaper every week, and he has this thing called the skip index, which he's an economist, and his view of, this is a very anecdotal view of how strong the economy is at any given time, is what he refers to as his skip index. And that is based on, when he looks out the window of his house, how many skips there are on the street. He lives in London, so obviously there's no driveways and things.
Skips as in rubbish skips?
As in rubbish skips, yes.
Well, yeah, that's a really interesting metric, actually, isn't it?
So he has this barometer where it's like, if there's no skips on the street, the economy's in a really bad shape.
And the logic is behind this is that the people that do home renovations typically fund it with debt.
I guess, but I don't know. He doesn't even go to that much.
And or big bonuses.
Yeah, he's just quite broad about it. He's just like, if there's no skips, the economy's in a bad place. If there's 2 skips, the economy's kind of okay and all right. And when we get to 4 skips, we know we're in boom territory. And I just thought it was a really,
at the moment, about
really
3 skips?
interesting
There's
way
a lot of
about
skips out there.
Just like, he said at the moment there are 2 skips. There's 2 skips on the street.
Not bad.
But he said at any given time, because he's a busy London street, there's always a number of different skips. But I thought it was a really good way of sort of saying, just open your eyes as you go about your life and you can actually really gather quite a lot of information.
Yeah, very subtle little messages that tell you a lot about what's happening in the real world and not necessarily what you read in the media. Because I think that's the danger, isn't it? Is we get very caught up in an echo chamber. You know, we all know how social media works. You click on one thing about the bad economy and all of a sudden that's all you see all the time, even though it's not necessarily the truth. Yeah. The social media algorithms think that's what you're interested in.
You just need to open your eyes sometimes. Somebody else said something else as well that clicked this week when they were talking about interest rates, and they sort of just said, as a very broad metric, when interest rates are high, it means the economy is really good because they're trying to cool down the economy. And we talk about how bad the economy is at the moment, but we've got the highest interest rates we've had in 20 odd years. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, there's different reasons. That's not entirely true, is it? Because at the moment,
it's simplistic.
Inflation. Yeah,
it's obviously very simplistic. But it's interesting that is like the main lever to say, cool the economy. Oh, no, we want the economy's doing bad. No, cut interest rates to speed it back up again. So it is a pretty big lever. Just on that though, the other argument for that is that actually our economy isn't doing well in terms of the global economy. We're falling behind other people, which is why prices are rising so much and why our currency is essentially devaluing and it's more expensive to import goods. So you can look at that. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I'm just saying this is what an economist said. He just said it in a broad way. He just put it out there and it made me go, oh yeah, good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the unfortunate thing is this lever around interest rates was sort of introduced like donkeys years ago.
Doesn't work as well as the lever.
And the global economy and the way that people act now just kind of isn't quite aligning with it anymore. Totally. But there's no other levers to pull right now, so they'll keep pulling it.
The other thing that I've shared with you this week that I thought was a really interesting quote I heard was, because I can resonate so much when I'm dealing with customers, I bet everyone on this podcast who listens to it can resonate with this. Most people don't want good advice. They want advice that sounds good.
Yeah.
And it just, oh my God, it's so deep and it's so clicked. I'm like, yeah. And we all get used to just telling customers what they want to hear to get the business and we fall into that trap because we know they don't want to hear good advice. What they want to hear is advice that sounds good.
Yeah, they want to hear what they want to hear and they're completely closed off. It's interesting actually because this week I was at a 2-day CEO mastermind event, Dan Bradbury's mastermind event. It was great and it was about decision making and how you can, essentially make better decisions. And a big part of that is opening yourself up to hearing it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Essentially, if you can just
not
do
be closed
that,
mind to.
I know. And it's kind of your natural default for a lot of people, particularly business owners. We can be quite egotistical, can't we? And we think that we know everything, and that sort of becomes our default position. It's only when you are comfortable appearing stupid that you can really start evolve.
I get this a lot in estate agency where, and a lot of industries like this, they become untrusted because they say that, they're not honest with us, they're dishonest, they tell us what we want to hear, blah, blah, blah. And you hear that all the time. But you realise over time, after a decade of working in it, that it's the consumer that's driven that behaviour from the estate agent, because they don't want to hear the truth.
Yeah.
They never do.
They don't want to hear that their house is worth nothing and it takes 6 months to sell it.
Not nothing. They don't want to hear everyone overvalues their own house. Anyway, let's not go down that route because that's a rabbit hole. Let's see what's in this week's news story of the week. So, Claire, big news this week. Volkswagen.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt there. Big news this week.
Okay. Interesting news this week. Okay. Shocking news I wasn't aware of this week. But the headline grabbed me. I love headlines that grab. It's clickbait. Volkswagen sold more sausages than cars last year.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I was reading into this, and as is quite common in manufacturing industries, it's really common for businesses to have staff canteens. And you can only imagine the amount of people that the Volkswagen Group employs around the world with the number of brands that they own. But they sold sausages in their canteen, so they developed their own sausages, a little bit like the route that IKEA went down originally. IKEA meatballs were for the workers.
Correct.
And they invented this sausage that was for their workers, but they now sell more sausages than cars. Not only do they feed their employees these sausages, but they have
it's a brand. It's gone way outside. So it's cool.
You can now buy them in supermarkets, and they even have a dedicated website that sells literally millions of them.
I know. It's called Currywurst.
It doesn't sound good, does it?
No.
It's a very German thing.
Well, it's a very specific thing. So Currywurst is a sausage topped with ketchup and curry spice and served with fries. Volkswagen have been producing its own version of the German fast food since 1973, originally intended to serve workers at its own canteens. The sausages are now sold by Volkswagen to other companies and supermarkets in 12 countries.
I bet it's like, I remember when I was a kid, we used to get those hot dogs that come out of a tin. And I bet it's like one of those hot dogs. Is it like a rollover hot dog? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's it. Show me a picture now.
Yes, I'm showing Claire a picture. They don't look appetizing.
I think using the word sausage is a bit.
They've got writing on them that actually say original Volkswagen on the actual sausage skin. I mean, that is branding and a half. It's tremendous, that is. So, how many do you think they sold? How many Currywurst units do you think they sold last year?
Oh, 10 million?
8.5 million. Yeah. Good guess. Very, very good guess. I don't know how many cars it sold because it doesn't say. Oh, no, it does. Yes, they sold 5.2 million vehicles last year.
So nearly double the amount of sausages.
But the big reason for the swing is that their total profits after tax fell 30.4% in 2024. So a real rough year for Volkswagen. Of course, they own Porsche, Audi, Skoda, loads and loads of brands, but they're having a really rough time at the moment. And you wouldn't think it because they seem to be, I feel they're kind of leading the way with electric cars and various other things, but maybe it's just that evolution is really damaging their margins quite dramatically, which it would be in production and manufacturing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and there's always particularly in manufacturing, there's these really specific sort of product life cycles that you go through, particularly with the machinery, like the investment up front. Obviously, there's a certain life cycle that your vehicles or your products have to go through for you to recoup your money. So, yeah, manufacturing is a really sort of unique and quite interesting industry when you start to look at the nuances of it.
It is indeed. Fascinating story. Picked that one out because I thought it was just a bit of fun and quite interesting. And I didn't realise they even had the sausage business. So to now be told that actually their brand is more sausage than it is car.
Yeah, and
it's a bit like the Mars situation.
I do think
more
though,
pet food than chocolate.
It's a bit of a loose, tenuous sort of headline, isn't it? Because really, the value, quantity-wise, they're selling these sausages that cost literally 2 pence to make versus a vehicle. So
it's artistic license from the the news outlets. Anyway, got a great one this week. So let's move on to this week's deep dive. So this week, Claire, I want to talk about how we can harness the success of the airline Ryanair and potentially whether we can use it in small business. I guess my question to you is, can we use Ryanair's killer strategy in small business? Now, basically, Ryanair have been such a phenomenally successful airline. They've done nothing but grow continuously for over 30 years now and have one of the largest airlines in the world in terms of the volume of aircrafts and what they cover. They are way, way more than, what you see in the UK. I mean, they're Europe's biggest airline, but they're really right up there with some of the American domestic airlines as well. And I think it's fascinating that they've had the same CEO for such a long time. Michael O'Leary's been there for, I think, way over 15 years as CEO, but before that as CFO. And his background's really interesting. And I've been doing a bit of reading about how they've got to where they've got to. And I also spotted him on a podcast recently. And I want to play you a 2-minute segment of this podcast about what he says is their secret to success.
You look at Ryanair's growth over the last 20 years, we've been competing with state-subsidised, state-owned monopolies who can't touch us.
What's the most fun competitive moment you've had?
In our industry, it's absolutely without doubt. It is doing aircraft deals at opportune timings with Boeing or with Airbus. I mean, all of our aircraft orders have been placed during moments of great crisis.
So when do you buy your planes?
We buy our planes when there is a crisis. We generally have a very strong balance sheet. Today, we have 4.7 billion in cash coming out of COVID because we went into COVID with about 3.5 billion in cash. We placed our first order after 9/11, 25 aircraft, and it was the making of Ryanair. And ever since then, we have also placed orders after the Gulf War, after the financial crash in 2007, 2009. We placed 2 huge bets. We ordered over 400 aircraft in 2 different orders in 2009, I think in 2011.
And what did you do during COVID?
What we did was we had huge aircraft orders. Boeing were in trouble because the MAX had been grounded for 2 years. We renegotiated the price of the existing aircraft deals. I mean, when we got a very significant discount from Boeing on what were already very lowly priced aircraft. So what we did is we went back and we renegotiated the order, but we increased the size of the order. So during COVID, we increased our order book from 150 to 210 aircraft, reduced the price, and lo and behold, as we emerge out of COVID now, airports all over Europe are looking for a return, a traffic recovery and growth. And we're the only airline in Europe that's taking delivery of 200 aircraft over the next 4.5 year period that can deliver that growth.
But why don't other airlines do the same? Is it because they haven't got any cash?
Well, mainly because they're all run by pilots, and then pilots want to go off and buy shiny new toys when all is good. And I'm like a farmer, my farming heritage in Ireland, we know we have to get through the winter, so we have to make money in the summer, sell the cattle, sell the crops. We hunker down for the winter, and then we hope always we can buy cheaply in the winter when other farmers are selling crops and cattle, and we treat aircraft the same way.
So what do you think? What do you think about that then, Claire?
That was just the weirdest moment ever, because I was sitting here thinking, do we now, we're not listening to the 2-minute clip, so I'm just going to insert that into the podcast afterwards, but we were silent for almost 2 minutes, and I thought, am I allowed to talk? What's going on? It was the bizarrest moment ever.
Anyway, you heard his point.
A potato farmer, classic Irish.
Yeah. But basically his background is farming. He's brought in farming, and he's brought this entire mentality of farming into business. So that's kind of a core aspect of how he works. He's kind of, he farms and then he reaps the seeds that he sows. But I'm particularly interested. He's obviously, insanely astute. This is somebody that usually you wouldn't advise people to try and effectively time the markets, which is to some degree
or
what
hold
he's
cash,
trying to do, or hold obscene amounts of cash. And I picked this out, Claire, because I know that you often tell me off and other people off for having too much cash on hand and not making their cash work hard enough. And that's why I wanted to sort of throw this one at you and say, here's a completely contrarian way to run your business, which is really to be the 1%. Do the opposite. This is like the Warren Buffett of airlines. Do the opposite of what the 99% are doing, and then reap those rewards. And as you've heard from him, they're coming out of all of these crises on top every time. So what do you think?
Well, the cynicism in me thinks that this is just shareholder propaganda for not investing or not paying bonuses or not paying dividends, however you want to wrap this up. I'm not convinced that this is truly the reason why they're hoarding cash. I don't know. There's just something that just doesn't quite stack up with me about this, because, the average lead time for a plane with Boeing is currently about 7.5 years.
Yeah.
And I think Boeing's got a backlog that they could not take a single another order for 11 years and still be producing
it's a very
planes at full
monopolistic
pelt
industry, isn't it?
Yeah, but so he's literally deciding that he's taking a punt on something in 7 years' time, and I'm not convinced that truly is the reason why Ryanair, why that's got a dot of difference to how successful Ryanair are. I do agree that in a business like that, you've got to take a punt, because if you don't place that order now and you get to summer in 7 years' time and you don't have enough planes to fulfill the demand, that is a big problem.
Well, I think his point that he's making there is he's recognising in the depth of a crisis that within 5 to 7 years, when those aircraft finally roll off the production line, his airline will be able to put an extra 100 aircrafts in the sky just at the point when the others are only placing their order, and take the market share.
Yeah, and that's what I'm just not convinced about. I'm just not really convinced that all the other aircraft makers are sitting on their laurels that much. Like, he's making out that basically nobody wants to buy an aeroplane at the time that he's placing an order, and he's getting like big discounts because of it. And I just think, well, you're buying 200 aeroplanes at a time. Like, you are going to get a discount. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't quite...
But he's also at the point where their manufacturing plants have been shut down and nobody's spending any money. Someone comes across with a checkbook. It's going to keep them going through that period. It's incredibly powerful, isn't it? As you know. Yeah,
but lots of the airlines placed orders during that period of time as well. It was quite famous that it happened. So yeah, I feel like there's the cynicism in me wants to say that Michael O'Leary was maybe doing a bit of a shareholder propaganda sort of.
But this isn't the first time he's done it.
However,
he did it in the Gulf War. He did it in the financial crisis. He's followed this strategy for 30 years.
However, let's play devil's advocate and ignore that and say this is the reason why they're successful. Well, I think that personally, that is what's the word I'm looking for? That is a factor of being in the airline industry. You have to make these decisions in anything where you're buying for lead times that are that far ahead. I work with a haulage company, for example. They need to have their trucks completely bespoke made. They can buy a tractor unit, but the back end is completely customized, bespoke made. And the current lead time on those is about 18 months.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of industry where they've got to take a punt now. How busy do we think we're going to be in 18 months?
Yeah.
And it is a punt, but at the end of the day, can you be pretty sure that, if you've been in business for 5, 10, 15, 50 years in Ryanair's case, that your business will continue to grow and grow at a certain rate? Yes, you can.
Or, to be able to, it's hugely risky to be able to place those orders in 7 years advance, various other things. So are they, using very, very advanced accounting forecasting, looking at their run rates of growth and various other things to be able to how do they de-risk that and make that a calculated risk rather than, a stupid risk, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say that this sort of falls into the realms of more like statistical analysis and economists rather than pure accounting. Like, absolutely, their accounting team will have some input on this. But you are right. It's kind of that very complicated forecast that says this is all of the variables that have gone into making a busy summer for us. And a lot of that's going to be based on the global economy and regulation and weather patterns and all of those types of things that go into it that, maybe an accountant probably isn't going to know. But if you can get that sales forecast, then absolutely an accountant would then be able to say, okay, this is where we're going to have a productivity issue and we're going to run out of aeroplanes, essentially, a capacity issue.
Okay. So contrary to, whether we believe it or we don't believe it, I certainly there's more than one example outside of airlines of where this type of strategy really pays dividend. Property investing is a really good example.
Mm-hmm.
If you build up a huge cash pool, everybody that ever makes any reasonable money in property buys contrarianly. They buy, 10 properties and they get fantastic discounts because nobody can sell them to anybody else. And, that just fundamentally works, doesn't it?
Warren Buffett's another example.
Warren Buffett's another one with shares. He'll build up his cash pool.
Yep.
He's doing exactly that now, anticipating that at some point, but he doesn't know whether it's 6 months or 5 years he might have to hold on to 300 billion pounds in cash and miss opportunities. So it's a very risky strategy, but it's a very lucrative strategy if you get it right. And how does that apply to other business?
Somebody like Warren Buffett, I think he's now sitting on like
330 billion.
Yeah, like
a third of their capital values. They're $1 trillion company.
He's sitting on an insane amount of cash. But I was reading something, and I'm going to go and find the actual details of this and come back to the podcast another time we can talk about this. But I was reading something about how long it took Warren Buffett to build his wealth. And actually, most of his wealth has been made in like the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, not 90% of his wealth came in the last 10 years, 10 years, over his 80-year career.
Whereas when you compare other traders and other investment companies and things like that on how much money they're making more regularly, actually Warren Buffett isn't that successful.
No, it's just compound. It's just
the compound effect. So
absolutely, yeah.
Therefore, is Warren Buffett's strategy right in this day and age? He's not outperforming the market. He's only outperforming the market if you look at that window when there's a downturn. Yes, Warren Buffett outperforms, and
we could go down a right road, I don't think anybody can outperform the market.
It's a little bit like, you can outperform the market. You can say on average the market is losing, we're up. You're outperforming the market, I feel a little bit that's what Ryanair does here. Because when people are feeling a little bit plush, I think every single one of our listeners will do absolutely anything they could to avoid getting on a bloody Ryanair plane. It's a horrible experience. Nobody enjoys it. Nobody wants to do it. So there is an argument to say that actually, Ryanair make a success of their business because there's always people that can't afford to travel and therefore are forced to go with Ryanair. And when demand is really high, there's not enough capacity and you have to get on an aeroplane, and Ryanair will do. But nobody is choosing Ryanair. Or
they bought up enough aircraft that they can buy up enough routes that they just dominate those routes. That means you haven't got a choice but to, when we fly, you don't have a choice but to fly Ryanair. If you want that destination at that time, that's the only choice.
It's the only one you can go
so
with.
Again, it's all part of the broader strategy.
But look, for me, this is not. I think this is quite a risky strategy. I think you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket. You're making a play that something that's going to happen in several years' time is going to come good for you. And I think that's quite a lot of risk, because you can't, take Ryanair's example. Once they place that order for the aeroplane, there's not much they can do until it's arrived. So what if it's the wrong decision? You can't. I'm sure there's contractual things that you can get out of it, et cetera, but really you can't get out of it. And I think that doesn't really have its place in small businesses so much. I think that you need to be much more agile, adapting to the circumstances that you're in. You've got much smaller pots of cash to play with. So what you do with your cash is much more important, because it really, we talk about Warren Buffett with that compound effect. What you do now,
little 1% moves in the right direction, and let them build and be patient over time, rather than this big bang.
Yes.
That's contrarian to the rest. Because if you get it wrong, you put yourself out of business, that type of thing. What about just a broader question about, obviously, a big benefit of being in that space is just the ability to be able to get the very best pricing, or to be able to drive the very best discounts in that situation. Is there a scenario where small businesses can apply that better by being better resourced or whatever at the right time?
What do you mean, sorry?
Well, as in, how can small businesses position themselves to get the best discounts, the best prices? Is there things that they can is there tactics they can take from this thought process that would help them and position them?
It's a really interesting question, because
should they, again, it all comes down to having liquidity in your business.
I think it is important. It is important to try and get the best price and get best value for money. But I also think that, that has a place in Ryanair's model, because Ryanair's entire business is built on being cheapest and keeping costs really low, and therefore keeping prices really low. But I think in a lot of businesses, business owners can get bogged down in details that don't move the dial. Like, I was having a conversation with one of my team members today. We were looking at a new payroll system, and we were literally talking about like a few £1,000s a year. And I'm thinking, in the grand scheme of things, should this even be in the conversation that's at my level in the business? And the answer to that is no. It's not. That £2,000 difference in the price between product A and product B was not going to move the dial in our business.
Which is interesting that you say that, because for the last 2 weeks, obviously, you've been procrastinating over about £6 on our Sky subscription as to whether we should cancel Sky or whether we should move away from it and get something else. So it's interesting that you have that view, but it's that do what I say, not do what I do type thing.
I fundamentally I dislike Sky because I don't think that their product is as good as it should be for the price.
Okay.
And I feel that they are ripping me off and not giving me value. And it's now like a point of principle.
Let's talk about Ryanair, but yes, you should never
I think you can sweat the small stuff too much and and the cost of not making a decision and not taking action by stopping and trying to figure out when's the best time to go, and can we wait for a sale, and can we do this or could we do that? There's a huge opportunity cost, because normally that means that you probably wasted a month, 2 months, sometimes even 6 months procrastinating, waiting for the right time to move, and you weren't making sales.
Okay.
And so for me, I think the biggest issue holding most small businesses back is that they don't make decisions rather than, or they're waiting for the perfect time. And I think that in a lot of small businesses is one of the key issues that prevents things from happening and prevents success.
What I took away from that, which was valuable, is that often I feel like the deal or the opportunity that's in front of me, if it's fairly good, I often feel like I have to do that deal because there might not be another one around in a short space of time that I can do again, for example. And what this has made me understand and feel more is that there will always be an opportunity for another deal that's as good or even better if you can just be patient. Because I've always, like you've been nervous about not maximising, making my money work hard enough and trying to reinvest it. But actually, it has made me think a lot different. I've been listening to that. I've been to a few other people that have talked about things similar, about actually just having a slightly just more patient view on it. It might just be my age that's going on. And it also makes a difference between when you're doing, so when you start building something, you just want to do lots of small things and you want to build it quick. But as you get established and you have got cash to play with, you start to think a bit differently about how you would deploy it. I certainly have. It's matured my mind massively.
There's a difference between making a knee-jerk bad investment and a knee-jerk good investment. And you need to be clear on what good means to you. And I think that's what doesn't happen early enough. Like, for example, if you're going in to buy an aeroplane, you've got a budget and you think, okay, what's the budget that I'm prepared to go to? And just simply, if a plane doesn't come along in your budget, you're not going to decide to buy it. That's going to be the deciding factor, more or less, really, is the price, isn't it? So Michael Leary's got a price that he wants to pay for aeroplanes, and he waits till the price hits that point. And as soon as the price hits that point, he moves.
Well,
so he's got a very clear framework of what a good deal does and doesn't look like to him. I think in small businesses, it becomes a bit more nuanced, and people are like, is this a good deal? Is this not a bad deal? They're not quite sure how to decide whether it's a good deal or not. And therefore, they make knee-jerk decisions and either pass up on a good deal or take a bad deal.
Now, I suspect that in Michael O'Leary's situation is that, just because of the monopolistic issue, and there's far more demand than there is possible supply for airplanes. And you are right, the lead time is 7 years. There are two manufacturers, Airbus and Boeing, and it's such a high barrier to entry business. No one can enter it. Because it takes, like, as I know from my airline days, it takes 5 years to get a new kettle signed off by the regulatory board. That's how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, a kettle for an airline.
A kettle, like, I'm not talking about kettle. Yeah. I just mean the pot they pour the tea out of. It's insane to put something on board an aircraft. And therefore, I would imagine that Boeing and Airbus are non-negotiable at all on their aircraft prices, because why do they need to be? So actually, by doing it this way, it's his only chance to negotiate the headline price down, possibly. And this applies similar to new build houses. I see this a lot where you cannot negotiate the headline price of a new build house at all in times that are good. But go back to Liz Truss's mini budget a few years ago and you walk in through the door and be able to buy a house and you can negotiate for the first time ever. And I think that's very much what the Michael O'Leary strategy is in airlines. And there is another example of where it can be used. There must be other examples across different business and purchasing supply chains where people will 90% of the time never move on their price. But then there is a market time that means that a conversation can be had.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we might be coming into those times now where businesses need to offload assets because it means that it's their survival. We need cash flow in, and the only way we can do that is to sell off some of our assets. Haulage businesses, for example, or anything that's got a fleet, anything that holds manufacturing that's got equipment, anything like that.
Or a subsidiary of their business.
A subsidiary of their business. How can we quickly raise some cash by disposing of assets? It could even be stock. Can we sell off some of our stock or something like that? So I do think that there is an argument to say that some of that could be coming, but you could waste if you believe we're up for a rough time in terms of the economy over the next few years. What if you hoard cash in case an opportunity comes over your door, and then we get 3-5 years time down the road and that opportunity didn't come? Then what? You've still got that cash in the bank and you've lost all that opportunity that you could have been using that cash proactively to grow your business.
Yes.
I always think that if an opportunity is that good and you want it that bad, you will find the money regardless. You will beg, steal, borrow, do whatever it takes.
You will find
a way. So I don't think that you should stop doing the good things that continue to grow your business, like investing, like marketing, like recruiting people, all those sort of daily operational things that help keep your business going forward. I don't think you should put any of them on hold in the hope that a good deal might come across your door.
Which is insane, because that is exactly what I think he's doing, because he's so frugal on costs across every other part of the business, but yet he's sat on this £4.7 billion cash pool. So
interesting conversation.
Anyway, I think that was a fascinating one that I pulled out, and hopefully you got some value out of that conversation. Let's move on to this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra. So this week, Claire, it's WhatsApp.
Specifically though, WhatsApp business.
What's can't get the words out. What's happening with WhatsApp?
WhatsApp business. So some people love it, some people hate it. Personally,
I didn't know anybody knew about it.
I'm not a fan of it. Do you know the reason I'm not a fan of it? Because I obviously, I'm an accountant. I spend I spend pretty much all day on my laptop. And so I have the WhatsApp app on my laptop, and there is no desktop app for WhatsApp business.
Oh, there is for the Mac though. It's not a problem for me. That's just you need to move from a Windows laptop to a Mac.
WhatsApp business is a desktop app.
Yeah, it's fine. It works on mine.
Are you doing it through your phone though? Through like the phone mirroring?
No. I've just got a dedicated app for the Mac.
Well, look, there's no Windows app, so that is the sole reason that I don't use WhatsApp Business.
Well, as I've always said, that's because
the key difference
chose an
between
inferior PC product.
The key difference between WhatsApp Business is that you can categorize your contacts and your messages and your groups and things like that.
Yeah, you can put flags against them. So if you've got a team using it, you can highlight different things, see who's watched, who's read it. The number one reason we moved to WhatsApp Business from normal WhatsApp was you can put an out of office on your WhatsApp.
Yeah, which
so
is
it
very
means
helpful.
that if you're away over the weekend or on holiday, or my team, on a day off that day, they put an out of office on it. It becomes really, really helpful. And the best thing about WhatsApp Business is it's totally free.
And there's automation as well. So, you can automate automatic responses back to your clients and things like that. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of it in general, but just for me personally, because I sit on my computer all day, I don't want to be looking at my phone.
There's loads of other marketing benefits to it as well, which I don't use, which you have to look into, because you can actually use it. The way they monetize it is you can use it to put adverts out on WhatsApp as well at like pence per WhatsApp. So you can build like broadcast groups and things like that, and you can pay to advertise. So that's where, if you want to tap into advertising to people on WhatsApp, you'd need to have a look at WhatsApp Business, set yourself up on there and see where that goes. But yes, that's my little tip for this week.
Do you know what I really loved about WhatsApp Business and why I'm gutted that it couldn't work for me is because I set up 3 categories. I have personal, which was friends and family. I have business, and then I do a lot of netball. So netball, there's just an insane amount of WhatsApp messages. It meant that you can mute different categories at different times. So, out of office hours at the weekend, all the business stuff was muted, and I wasn't being distracted by people that were business contacts, and I was just solely focused on friends and family. So it can really help if you're typical business owner and you struggle to switch off and you get pulled into things. Can be a good tool for that.
Great. Well, as usual, if you think you might have outgrown your current accountant and you'd like to work with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth, nip over to the website profitcashgrowth.com. On there you can book a free discovery call or a free business health check for your business. Get the ball rolling, have a few chitty chats with the team and see if they can help you. As always, check out the YouTube channel, check out the back catalogue of podcasts. They're all extremely evergreen, so you can learn something from every single one of them. And we will inevitably see you again next week.